So whoops, I changed the world. Well, who am I? I'm no one of note. That's the point. We live in a world where everybody's glued to their smartphones. We're all using apps, websites all the time, and it's not a Western trend. This photo is by Craig Modd. He's a photojournalist. He writes essays for The Atlantic. He wrote an essay that I really liked about being in Myanmar and how he didn't understand why he kept seeing farmers sat atop buffalo on the top of hills, glued to their phones. I mean, what were they all doing? So he went around and he interviewed some of these farmers, and the first one was playing Clash of Clans. Okay. Second one, playing Clash of Clans. And they're all sat on their buffalo playing Clash of Clans. And why on the buffalo? Because the signal was better. So Craig also had a go at the game, really liked it, but he didn't have his own buffalo signal booster, unfortunately. So we don't just use these mobile devices, and it is mainly mobile across the world. I mean, in the Western Hemisphere, we're sort of looking at desktops, but everywhere else it's mobile phones. And people are using them alone, but they're also using them socially. In this picture behind me, you can see some people sharing things on screen. But what I see most often is people actually allegedly together, but engrossed in their own virtual worlds. So this is a fairly typical scene in any cafe, young people who have come together ignoring each other because they're glued to their phones. And they're probably tweeting or on Instagram or sending each other Snapchats, and there's loads of hashtags. Everything has a hashtag. The danger we have here is that if it doesn't get a hashtag, will it be history? And that is also more dangerous when the work of people like Mark Graham tells us that across the world, this content that's being generated, it's massively unequal. There are vast swathes of the world where the content is being created on behalf of people or not at all. We also have this issue now where everyone wants to be a citizen journalist and participate, and that's great, except for when you get your 15 minutes of fame for the wrong reason. There was a woman that worked in PR who she was going to South Africa from LA. She tweeted something. It was supposed to be a joke about her white privilege, but it came off crass and racist. And by the time she'd landed in Johannesburg, she'd lost her job. There was another guy, there were some problems at Robin Hood's airport, and he tweeted something about blowing it up. He didn't just lose his job, he was arrested. So, you know, this is all interesting stuff, it's serious stuff. We also see that young people, I've mentioned that about perfect faces, everybody needs to be perfect all the time, to the point there was this rumour that the latest iPhone has a filter built into the camera. It doesn't, but why wouldn't we believe that? Because it's perfectly in keeping with the Instagrammable culture that we're creating. And other studies show us that young men today, there's an increasing prevalence of impotence. Is it a coincidence that this generation has had unprecedented access to porn online? We also have young people having far less sex these days. That might not be a bad thing, but it's different. And this screen time, it's really damaging to young children. When we're on our phones all the time, our tablets all the time, and of course children model our behaviour, but when really young children get addicted to screens, it affects the way their brains develop. They're not able to focus, to concentrate. They're less able to understand your attitude, to empathise. Their vocabulary is stunted. I mean, that's not an insignificant list. We also have this concept now of an always-on culture because we're always connected. We're expected to be accessible and responsive and available. But people are stressed and anxious and feeling burnout. There's lots of articles about why are millennials so awful. Well, it's because we're all burnt out all the time. And actually, you know, there's lots of work that shows us that these things are happening, and they may not be inherently bad things, but we won't know without hindsight. It might be an evolutionary adaptation, or it might be an enormous misstep. So how do we get here? Well, once upon a time, far, far away, and right here as well, lots of people like myself stumbled into a fledgling industry called new media, when marketing departments around the world went, ooh, there's this thing called the World Wide Web, do you think we could sell stuff? And there were lots of us, and you know, I arrived in 1998, having dropped out of university, having done nothing useful at all, and started taking briefs from clients. How do we use the tech to achieve a particular aim? And this was before e-commerce, so if a garment manufacturer came to me and said, make people want my product, it's like, okay, how do we do that? Because you can't let people try it on, you can't let people experience a jacket online. So we started doing things like making them whiz around, zooming in and out, maybe letting you undo zips if technical sportswear is great for that because there's zips everywhere. These are things to make you desire the thing. And we'd obviously put a link there to where the store was. Go and find the store and buy it immediately. But the relationship between action and sale wasn't obvious, and there are lots of skeptical finance directors. So we had to prove that our work was worth investing in. So the metric we started to use was, how long can we keep you on a website? We built loads of games and toys and frivolities. We tried to keep you there as long as possible, and we also tried to get you to tell your friends, because word of marketing is a really powerful tool, of course. But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We, very early on, were talking about things like learned web conventions, but actually none of us had been doing this stuff long enough to have learned anything. And the few people that were doing empirical research, like Jacob Nielsen, who was basically the father of usability, I thought he was the king of the internet back in the day, they were telling us that people read in an F-shaped pattern, so that means we put the navigation at the top or the left so that it was where you looked first of all. But it might just be that there were so few people participating and being measured that were reinforcing our own patterns, and that they weren't the best things to do, but that's what happened. We became really obsessed with measurement because, again, how do we justify the investment that companies were making in this new technology, in all these frivolous games and things like that? And I mean, for my postgrad studies, developed a model of engagement. Engagement is a hideous buzzword. Basically, how can I steal your attention for as long as possible to make you do stuff? That's what engagement is. Everyone talks about it as a lovely thing, but it's not. It's cynical and manipulative. But I developed this model based partly on reading studies and other people's work, but partly from anecdotal, empirical evidence I'd picked up along the way. And we used all these tools to then model and predict what you might do and get you to buy more stuff. And we could sort of argue, well, it wasn't me, it was my stakeholders. But that's really disingenuous. Nobody forced me to do anything. Nobody asked me to do anything that was unethical. And it's really satisfying to solve a problem and to see some data that says that your idea has worked and it's actually changed something. But while we were all busy working individually in silos all around the world, doing things, our hive mind was starting to establish particular patterns, particular behaviours, and we were all individually obsessed, but a revolution was happening, and it's our work that was underpinning this. But how do you stop a revolution if the revolutionaries don't know they're in revolt? I was really careful not to put the revolutionaries are revolting. And lots of clever people started studying the phenomena that we've observed, but they were kind of doing it a bit after the fact. Lots of people have done lots of interesting work. I'm a particular fan of Dana Boyd, who has this essay about hacking the attention economy. And if you've ever been rickrolled, you've had your attention hacked. If you haven't been rickrolled, once upon a time, someone thought it'd be really funny to post a link that looked like it was going somewhere, and actually it just goes to a video of Rick Astley singing "I Never Want to Give Up." And that thing, it took off and it became a massive fad. And online there is this cultural idea about memes, and memes generate more memes, and it's really interesting what gets picked up. So who should be in charge of societal change? For me, it's faintly horrifying that we've got some societal change driven by marketing budgets, essentially. And we could argue that the Industrial Revolution was very similar, but I think a key differentiator is that the societal change that came about through the Industrial Revolution with the Luddites, etc., was almost a byproduct of people trying to change things for profit, whereas in the Digital Revolution, we absolutely purposefully tried to change your behaviour. We did it on purpose. We just didn't realise the impact it would have. And we're doing all this without any kind of central framework. There's no one regulator for the World Wide Web. That's the point. It's global, it's open. Except that means that any laws and regulations are local, and anything broader than that is best endeavours, it's principles, it's ideals. But also, there's no feedback loop. All these people doing research, I can sit in a room working on a website and completely ignore everything that anybody has learnt. I don't have to take it on board. So what do we do now? I mean, really, we read the studies, we educate ourselves, we consider being armchair anthropologists rather than armchair psychologists. And anyone who's working in an emergent industry, so artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, biohacking, neural interfaces, think about what you're doing. Take time to step back and observe and reflect, because the change we have made just by moving services online has been quite profound. So really, anyone who works in an emergent industry where humans and computers interact has the potential to be a social innovator and to change things. And with power comes great responsibility. So I would just say, innovate responsibly.